After this introduction to a strand of my research regarding oceans, I'm then going to question the potential of new writing to work in terms of decolonising material art practices in the time of climate change, and particularly here in GSA. Basically, in this incredible pool of people talking, I'm like a very small fry minnow, and came to this panel because I'm a really big fan of Emma's work. Her piece, A Shoal of Lovers Leads Me Home, published in Anathema, an incredible triennial speculative fiction magazine that could be said to fall within the realm of dialectics, which is something I've become really interested in recently. In its scope, activation, and prose. By deconstructing a heteronormative Western tale regarding climate change and the ocean, it opens up an incredible space for radical thinking, where concepts rather than objects are essentialized. So thank you so much for that, Emma. This is a quote here from Bermudas, which is a poem by the Barbadian poet Cameron Mackay, and he presents us with something called dialectics, which is a radical methodology through which we can decolonize thinking and action in art regarding our oceans. The work of those studying in this field presents proposals and policies to push for and follow up on. In the intersection of climate change and climate suffering, white people are massively causal, but disproportionately unaffected by the consequences. And I implicate myself in this causal effect and recognize this as my point of departure, hoping to make the labour of my research a tiny part of its undoing. Dialectics states that if dialectics describe how, quoted Braithwaite, Western philosophy has assumed people's lives should be, then dialectics delves deeper into deeper layers of meaning, involving a variety of different readings and interpretation. Again, quoting Braithwaite, for water is a transitory element, and a being dedicated to water is a being in flux. Flux and nuance can be seen as tools to fight power and privilege, capitalism and patriarchy, and foster inclusive climate activism and artivism. Being fluid, we can drench, disperse, recede where necessary, like waves, and regroup when requested. My work regards the North Atlantic and spirals outwards from an idea that by decentralizing the rhetoric of dominant colonial and capitalist land masses associated with the area, the East Coast USA, and the mainland United Kingdom, is key to challenging the dominant epistemologies about the territory. What can we do as people who live in those places, but by pulling those colonial powers out of that space? After all, in theory and in policy, they do not and actually should not have jurisdiction there. Enacting the use of poetic prose and feminist memoir as an action led by Adrienne Maree Brown's concept of emergence and pleasure activism, finding sumptuousness in words and the raising of complex systems and patterns is an act of resistance against patriarchal capitalism. In this mode, Rachel Carson's seminal essay, Undersea, originally published in 1937, is of key importance to situating my research in what would have been called nature writing. Although the genre has a problematic name, the Enlightenment separation of nature and culture has had its devastating effects. And nature writing being all writing, as all is nature, I'm interested in how those working in this form present the idea that, and this is full quote on the screen there, that we can take seriously the claims of art to be able to enable us to imagine other futures, and suggest that new writing, new art writing, new nature writing has the potential to play a role in collective forms of environmental justice and capabilities. The work is intended to combat environmental melancholia, which I'm also hugely guilty of. In terms of the North Atlantic and reflecting Maree Brown and Peter Linebaugh's activity, of the politics of activity, the poetic prose mode is presented as an activity that expresses knotted relationships, framing the language as an act of resistance to nefarious powers, both current and historic. This mode responds to those who are making nefarious decisions on our behalf, not in their language, but in an emergent language of our own. I think being responsive is part of being responsible. In a recent tweet, writer Holly Pester notes, "The earth is not dying, it's responding. Species are dying." No other substance in nature can store, transport, contain trauma, release, conceal, and destroy as water can. The depth and volume of the North Atlantic is almost inconceivable. Inconceivability is a key part of global political fascism. People are deprived of information and bombarded by misinformation. Clarity like the ocean's depths becomes inconceivable. Water surrounds us, but this does not have to make us claustrophobic. It can sustain us. We are in a symbiotic relationship. Its undulations, in their non-human forms, can seduce us. By imagining the experience of the ocean as embodied and not didactic, the sea can become a site for empathy rather than a site for sympathy in terms of climate change. It may seem strange sometimes to talk about writing so extensively in an art school setting, and art writing itself is an emerging field. However, I'm interested in how writing can decolonize the expensive material practices we are often exposed to as early career artists in a time where our world is already full of stuff. I've seen an exhibition made from concrete at a high-profile gallery be put in a skip once it was done. In recent Friday events, we have sometimes been presented with white artists who have extremely expensive, natural resource-heavy practices. These practices are born of a more abundant pre-2008 funding landscape funded by white colonial governments. And they can be toxic to young artists looking for a more tenable route. Like many, high white commodity art is worrying me. Perhaps writing, which can be spread digitally for free, like Emma's amazing story that I read, staged or performed, can be a more ephemeral gesture to encourage activation of habitual change and to hold the system that I implicate myself within to account. Words are spells and invitations. They all exist, and we rearrange them over and over to say our truth.